Hi, everybody. Big goals are very important, but at the same time, they generate a lot of pressure in the very first sight. They might seem impossible to achieve. That is why it is important to set smaller goals, which are easier to achieve and still enable you to achieve that one big goal. In the end, you will do the same amount of work, but psychologically, it will be easier if you choose to go with the small goals to achieve the big goal. Once upon a time, there was a giant bathtub that had been dumped in the middle of the forest. It was the perfect home for all types of little insects. They had to be careful of just one thing while living there, and that was to ensure the plug hole remained free from obstruction because otherwise they might all drown if rain fell suddenly and filled the tub. The strong beetles were put in charge of keeping an eye on the plug hole to make sure that it was never blocked. However, one day disaster struck. The plug hole was blocked by something huge, something gigantic. It was a watermelon. The watermelon was so big that not even the biggest beetle, not even five biggest, could move it. In fact, it was so big that not even all the beetles working together could move the watermelon from the plug hole. Then all the strongest insects tried their very best to move the watermelon but could not budge it even the tiniest bit. The smartest insects then tried to use their brains to come up with a way to move the watermelon, but they had no luck either. It was impossible. Eventually, the wisest insects started to plan the escape from bathtub. Amidst all the sadness, a foreign ant, but it had the nerve to ask if she could take the watermelon away with her. All the beetles started laughing at the small ant and said, "Very funny indeed. That is impossible. Just look at you." It took a lot of insects to calm the beetles down and stop them from crushing the funny little ant. So the insects told the little funny ant that she could take the watermelon, and the sooner the better. So the ant went off, promising to return with some friends at the end of the day. After the small ant left, the insects were still working on their plan to escape as they did not believe the funniest little ant. But the ant wasn't joking at all. At the end of the day, she returned, and this time with thousands upon thousands of another ants. In perfect order, each ant went up to the watermelon, bit off a piece, and walked off with it. "You are not going to get anywhere by doing that," said a grasshopper to one of the ants and stopped for a second to rest. "The watermelon is exactly the same as it was before. You bit your piece off." Are you sure about it?" The ant responded in a funny and accent as if it had never occurred to her. Then, without giving it another thought, they resumed her journey. However, that little piece must have had an effect. Just a few days later, there was not a single trace of the giant watermelon, and the insects learned something and decided to change their ways. So, from that day on, many of the most difficult jobs in the bathtub became small ones that were easier to carry out little by little, piece by piece, step by step. And all of this was because one funny little ant was thinking outside the box and saw how to do a big job in a small and easily manageable steps. So this is what is the takeaway from this story that big goals are very important, but at the same time, they generate a lot of pressure. And at the very first sight, they might seem impossible to achieve. That is why it is important to set smaller goals, which are easier to achieve and still enable you to achieve that one big goal. Out of box thinking is very important. In most cases, there is more than one way to solve a problem. That is why it is good to take a step back and take another look at the whole situation, or maybe ask someone who is not so familiar with the problem to give you his point of view of a potential solution. Being too knowledgeable about a certain thing can sometimes cause limitations in seeing things differently. Stay blessed.